There was a time when every neighborhood in America had the same car parked in at least one driveway. Long body, flat roof that stretched all the way to the tailgate, wood panels on the sides, or at least the suggestion of them. A rear-facing third-row seat where the kids sat watching the road disappear behind them. The station wagon. For nearly 4 decades, it was the default family vehicle in the United States. Not because it was exciting, not because it was glamorous, but because it did something no other type of car could do at the time. It carried everything: the kids, the groceries, the dog, the luggage, the camping gear, and still drove like a regular car on the highway. And then, almost overnight, it vanished. By the mid-1990s, the American station wagon was effectively dead, replaced by something taller, boxier, and supposedly better. The SUV took its parking spot, its market share, and its identity, and America never looked back. But the question nobody asks is this: was the station wagon actually replaced by something better? Or did America simply get talked into wanting something different? The wagon was not invented in a factory. It evolved from necessity. In the 1920s and 1930s, hotels and train stations needed vehicles that could carry passengers and their luggage from the depot to the resort. Local coach builders took standard car chassis and built extended wooden bodies on them, with flat load floors and rear doors that opened wide. They were called station wagons because they literally served the station. By the late 1940s, the major automakers saw the potential. Ford, Chevrolet, Plymouth, and others began offering factory-built wagons based on their standard sedan platforms. The wooden bodies gave way to steel, but the proportions stayed: long roof, flat floor, maximum interior volume on a car-sized footprint. The 1950s were when the station wagon became an American institution. Families were moving to the suburbs. The interstate highway system was being built. Vacations by car became a national ritual, and the wagon was the vehicle that made all of it work. You could load a family of 5 or 6 into a full-size wagon, pack the cargo area to the ceiling, drive 800 miles, and arrive with everyone and everything intact. Automakers understood the cultural moment and leaned into it. The designs became expressive. Chevrolet offered the Nomad, a 2-door hardtop wagon that looked like it belonged at a country club. Ford built the Country Squire with its signature wood grain paneling, a design detail that became so iconic it defined the entire category for decades. Chrysler, Buick, Oldsmobile, and Pontiac all offered their own versions, each with different trim levels, engine options, and interior configurations. By the 1960s, the wagon had reached its peak as a design form. The bodies were enormous. Some full-size wagons measured over 18 feet long. The tailgates became engineering marvels, with dual-action systems that could swing open like a door or fold down like a truck bed. Power rear windows slid into the tailgate at the push of a button. Third-row seats faced backward, giving kids their own private world behind the second row. Air conditioning, power steering, and automatic transmissions made these massive vehicles surprisingly easy to drive. The engineering underneath was simple but effective. Because wagons shared their platforms with sedans, they inherited the same ride quality, the same handling characteristics, and the same engine options. A Chevrolet Caprice wagon drove almost identically to a Caprice sedan. This was the wagon's greatest practical advantage. It was a truck's worth of space in a car's body. No ladder frame, no high step-in height, no compromised ride, just a longer roof and a bigger rear end. The 1970s brought the first signs of trouble. The oil crisis hit, and suddenly those massive V8-powered wagons looked irresponsible. Automakers responded by downsizing. Wagons got smaller, lighter, and more fuel efficient. Mid-size wagons, like the Chevrolet Malibu wagon and the Ford Fairmont wagon, replaced the land yachts of the previous decade. These were still good vehicles, practical and honest, but they had lost some of the grandeur that made the full-size wagons feel special. Then the minivan arrived. In 1983, Chrysler launched the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager. They were taller than wagons, with sliding side doors, flat floors, and configurable seating. They could carry more people more easily in a shorter body. For families with small children, the sliding doors alone were a revelation. No more swinging doors into adjacent cars in parking lots. No more kids climbing over folded seats to reach the third row. The minivan did not kill the wagon immediately, but it started the cultural shift. The wagon was suddenly the old way. The minivan was the new way. And American consumers, as they always do, chased the new. But the real death blow came from an unexpected direction, the SUV. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, vehicles like the Ford Explorer, the Jeep Grand Cherokee, and the Chevrolet Tahoe began appearing in suburban driveways. They were truck-based, body-on-frame vehicles with four-wheel drive, high ground clearance, and a rugged image that appealed to buyers who wanted to feel adventurous, even if they never left the pavement. The SUV offered something the wagon never could, an image. The wagon said responsible parent. The SUV said active lifestyle. The wagon said practical. The SUV said capable. It did not matter that most SUVs rode worse than wagons, got worse fuel economy, handled more clumsily, and were harder to load because of their higher cargo floors. The image won, the substance lost. There was also a regulatory factor that most people never knew about. In the United States, the corporate average fuel economy standards treated trucks differently from cars. SUVs, classified as light trucks, faced lower fuel economy requirements. Station wagons, classified as cars, faced stricter standards. This meant automakers could sell a large, profitable SUV more easily than a large, profitable wagon. The regulations did not intend to kill the station wagon, but they created an economic incentive that made it far more attractive for manufacturers to build SUVs instead. By the mid-1990s, the American station wagon was essentially gone from the mainstream market. Buick discontinued the Roadmaster wagon in 1996. It was the last of the great full-size American wagons. After that, the only wagons available in the United States were European imports from Volvo, Audi, BMW, and Mercedes. Functional, premium, and expensive. The affordable, democratic American wagon, the one that every family could own, had disappeared. What replaced it was not better in every way. SUVs burned more fuel. They were more prone to rollovers because of their higher center of gravity. They were harder for elderly passengers to climb into. Their cargo areas, despite looking larger, were often less usable because the load floor sat so much higher off the ground. And they cost more because truck-based platforms were more expensive to manufacture. The wagon did everything the SUV does, with fewer compromises, on less fuel, with a lower center of gravity, and with a more comfortable ride. It was, by almost every objective measure, a better family vehicle. But objectivity rarely wins in the car business. Emotion does. And the SUV made people feel something the wagon never could. Elevated, commanding, ready for anything, even if anything just meant the school drop-off lane. Today, the station wagon exists mostly as a memory. A few European manufacturers still build them. Volvo, Audi, and Porsche offer wagons in some markets. In America, they are niche vehicles, bought by enthusiasts who understand what they are getting. The mass market has moved on to crossovers, which are essentially tall wagons that no one is willing to call wagons. But something interesting is happening. Nostalgia is growing. Vintage wagons from the 1960s and 1970s are climbing in value. Social media is full of restored country squires, nomads, and Vista cruisers. A new generation of car enthusiasts is discovering what their grandparents knew, that a long roof, a flat floor, and an honest silhouette is one of the most beautiful and functional shapes ever put on four wheels. The station wagon did not die because it failed. It died because America changed its mind about what a family car should look like. The wagon was too humble, too honest, too practical to survive in a market that increasingly rewarded image over substance. But the best designs have a way of coming back, and the station wagon, quiet and patient, may simply be waiting for the world to remember what it already knew. If you believe the best machines deserve to be remembered, subscribe to Timeless Treasures and hit the bell. We tell the stories behind the vehicles that shaped how we live, one road and one era at a time.